What's happening? Happy hump day to you and yours. Thanks for joining me. As always, it is much appreciated. So much has happened over the last 18 hours or so. I'll just start here. Be happy you're not a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. Condolences to Kendra Middleton for being a Jaguars fan because the Jaguars just fired their GM, Trent Baalke, in the middle of a coaching search. Unbelievable. So let's just start with the fact that you are not a Jags fan. That's a great thing. It's a great thing to wake up and not be a Jaguars fan. All right, let's get to the Patriots because there is just so much news we have to pour over. First and foremost, about an hour ago, it became official. Alex Van Pelt is out. Alex Van Pelt is officially out. Mark Daniels of Mass Live reporting that the Patriots are overhauling their offensive staff. This is not surprising. As soon as Josh McDaniels was named last night, we found out that news. Of course, Breaking News Podcast. You could check it out on the channel. But as soon as we found out that Josh McDaniels was going to be the guy, it made it much more difficult to see a fit for Van Pelt. The hypothetical situation scenario that I mentioned a week ago or so was this idea that you would bring in a new offensive play caller who hadn't dealt with quarterbacks before, let's say a Nick Caley, for example, and Van Pelt would stay on the staff to work with Caley hand in hand to, help Drake May as Caley handled the play calling. McDaniels, he has lots of experience, as we discussed last night, with handling quarterbacks, developing quarterbacks, has a ton of experience when it comes to play calling. So McDaniels being the hire made it much more likely that Van Pelt was out. You've got different verbiage as part of that system as well. So they're not really on the same page. They're probably not even in the same book, although they might be if McDaniels is evolving this offense and moving closer to kind of West Coast concepts and verbiage and simplifying things. But it just didn't make as much sense to keep Van Pelt with McDaniels as the guy. McDaniels is going to be in charge of the continuing development of May. He's going to be in charge of the offense. So once that happens, there's a lot less room for anybody of Van Pelt's stature to kind of hang around and be the helper of McDaniels. Doesn't make much sense for McDaniels. Doesn't make much sense for Van Pelt. Doesn't make much sense for May, frankly, because you've got to go all in on this Josh McDaniels thing. He's the guy now. So a massive overhaul on the offensive staff. Again, not surprising. This is what happens when a new head coach comes in. New head coach comes in. They clear the decks. Lots of the old staff is gone. Most of the old staff is gone. It's how the NFL works. I will stand by this. My final goodbye to Van Pelt. He was the best of the trio, and I know it's a low bar, but he was much better than Gerard Mayo doing his job. He was much better than DeMarcus Covington doing his job. He was not better than Jeremy Springer doing his job on special teams. But I do think I would like to send a thank you to Van Pelt for at least being somewhat adequate after what we had to witness this past season. Again, very low bar. I get it. But thank you, Alex, for not being a complete and utter and unequivocal disaster. You weren't great, but you were not a disaster. So thank you for that. There were some glimpses that we got to enjoy during the season because of you. And of course, the work that Van Pelt did with Drake May. That should not be overlooked. It won't be overlooked by me. I don't think many of you will overlook that. Who knows what would happen if the Patriots brought in a Nick Caley? Now, of course, the thought was supposedly that it would be Caley and maybe Van Pelt or McAdoo working with the quarterbacks. But you don't know how that would have worked out. At least we can look at Van Pelt and say, thank you for handling Drake May in the right way. Thank you for helping him develop. He's far from a finished product. But you got Drake May's career off to a pretty good start. So thank you, Alex Van Pelt. We appreciate it. Good luck in your future endeavors. That is one of the Elliott Wolf successes, you could say, as well, right? Elliott Wolf is the reason why Van Pelt was brought in. And so was Springer. So you can look at those guys and say, credit to Elliott Wolf. I know there's a lot that he did not do well, but I do think Wolf can look back at the Alex Van Pelt hiring, especially considering the circumstances, the fact that he was 11th or 12th on their list, if Wolf is not here, I don't know who would have been the OC last year with Jerod Mayo. So thank you, Van Pelt, for developing Drake May, helping Drake May take that next step. And now it's on to Josh McDaniels. Meanwhile, big news this morning. And we talked about it a little bit last night during the McDaniels Breaking News podcast. Terrell Williams is your new defensive coordinator. The Patriots have agreed to bring in Terrell Williams. They bypassed the opportunity to talk to a lot of other experienced guys. You know, Matt Eberflus is out there. Looks like Robert Saleh might end up in Jacksonville, but who knows now because of what just happened in Jacksonville. That's a flip of the coin. Who knows? They might be pulling names out of a hat within the next week to be the next Jaguars head coach. But you do look at some of these experienced defensive coordinators. They could have interviewed those guys. Vrabel decided to go with his guy. I don't know how many interviews were held. I don't know how many interviews. We know Ryan Crow was somebody who they talked to. Miami Dolphins outside linebackers coach who worked with Vrabel, Tennessee. I would not be surprised if Crow joins the staff to coach underneath Williams. But Terrell Williams seemed to be the favorite from the very beginning. You know, Vrabel thought so highly of Terrell Williams that he put the title of assistant head coach next to his name in 2023. So Vrabel thinks very highly of Williams. This is not a surprise whatsoever that he's going to be the guy. Now, you might ask, Nick, is he going to work out? I don't know. I'm honest with all of you, right? I have no idea if Terrell Williams is going to be a good defensive coordinator, very good defensive coordinator, or terrible defensive coordinator because he's never done the job. And this goes back to last offseason when I gave the benefit of the doubt to the coaching staff because I said, let's see if they can do the job. I'm not going to tell you that somebody can't do the job until I see them incapable of doing said job, i.e. Jerod Mayo, by the Arizona game. It was what it was. I.e. DeMarcus Covington, what we saw from him throughout the season. So I don't know. There's always a first time, right? There's always a first time for these coordinators. So maybe Terrell Williams will be a great defensive coordinator. Maybe he won't be a good defensive coordinator. Nobody knows. I don't even think Terrell Williams knows if he's going to be good at this job or not. But I do think a couple of things. I do think hiring a first-time defensive coordinator is much more palatable than it was last year because you have Josh McDaniels and you have Mike Vrabel. This isn't a first-time head coach. This is not a first-time offensive coordinator or an offensive coordinator that had not done the job in 15 years. You have two solid, experienced guys leading the program in Vrabel and leading the offense in McDaniels. So you could take a little bit of a swing here on a rookie defensive coordinator because you have experience in those other spots. And Springer is not a first-time special teams coordinator anymore, right? He proved himself last year. So you have three guys. You got your head coach, your offensive coordinator, and your special teams coordinator. All of those guys are experienced. They know exactly what they want to do. They know exactly how to do it. So Terrell Williams coming in as the first-time DC isn't as big of a deal. The problem with last year's staff was that you had just inexperience across the board. You had Van Pelt from 2009, not calling plays in 15 years. Mayo, first-time head coach, never a coordinator, right? We know the deal last year. Covington, first-time defensive there was so much new and so much inexperience that it was, a perfect storm of a disaster. But when you look at Williams, it's a different situation, different circumstances, because he has a much more stronger system around him and stronger coaches around him. So it's more palatable to take that swing on defense. Another reason it's more palatable to take that swing on defense. I'll share that in a moment. But of course, I got to do this at least a couple times a show. You know the deal. We've tried to take advantage of that algorithm. Couple of ways that we can do it. Doesn't cost you any money. You don't have to spend a ton of time doing so. Just click that thumbs up as you watch on YouTube right now, live and local. If you're in New England, the Nick Cattle Show, don't forget to click that thumbs up. That helps us with the algorithm. Don't forget to throw a comment in your thoughts about AVP moving on, even if it's a thank you AVP for helping with Drake May, or it's a goodbye AVP. We appreciate you, but don't let the door hit you with a good Lord split you. Whatever you want to do, don't forget to give that thumbs up. throw a comment in, and subscribe. We're creeping up. We're past 5,600 subscribers. The next goal is 6,000. We can get there with your help. Like, comment, subscribe, Spotify, Apple Pods, friends, rate and review. And you can also throw comments in there as well. All right, back to the hiring of Terrell Williams as the new defensive coordinator. And by the way, the Patriots officially just tweeted out, "Welcome to New England, Terrell Williams." So the Patriots have officially announced Terrell Williams as the DC, and they have also officially welcomed Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator. So the official team tweets for McDaniels and Williams have been tweeted out. I would imagine that this means we'll get some kind of press conference, hopefully, with one or both of these guys within the next couple days, I would think. But now it's officially official, as they say. So Williams in, McDaniels in. The team has tweeted that out for both of them. All right, back to Williams. He was with Mike Vrabel in Tennessee, a defensive lines coach. Again, in 2023, Vrabel bumped him up to assistant head coach to go along with that defensive line coach title. Last year, he was the defensive line coach and run game coordinator, defensively speaking, for the Detroit Lions. So he was in Detroit this past year, defensive line, run game coordinator. Before that, he was with Vrabel in Tennessee, defensive lines coach, and then defensive lines coach / assistant head coach. He's been in the NFL. This is another big difference, right? He's been in the NFL since 2012. This is not a newbie. He coached with the Raiders. He coached with the Dolphins. He then joined Vrabel in Tennessee, and then he went to Detroit for this past season since Vrabel didn't have a job. So this is somebody who has coached in the NFL since 2012. Before getting into the NFL in 2012, you had Terrell Williams coaching at the college football level for 14 years. 14 years. So he has been a coach for more than 25 years. This is somebody who has a lot of experience on that side of the ball. Again, not as a defensive coordinator, but somebody who's been coaching for a very long time. Understands the game, understands players, understands what makes them tick. So there is a lot of experience for Terrell Williams, just not at the DC job. First-time play caller, get ready for some bumps. Get ready for some bumps. Of course, with every first-time play caller, you're going to have some ups and downs. You just don't want as many downs as we had last year with DeMarcus Covington. You want to have more ups than downs. You want to see improvement throughout the year. So I would anticipate, especially in the first month and a half of the season next year, that we could see some play calling, bumps, challenges for Terrell Williams early on. Here's the good thing, though. Not only do you have this strong structure now within the coaching staff, it also allows Mike Vrabel, a guy that you now have as your head coach, to step in. And I don't think Mike Vrabel is going to pull a Gerard Mayo. I don't think Mike Vrabel is going to stand there on the sidelines and let his defense get torched over and over and over again and not step in. Vrabel, as we know, is somebody who will absolutely 100% step in when there's a mess. I don't think Vrabel is going to let Terrell Williams run this defense into the ground and just sit back and enjoy watching it as it just continues to fall off that cliff. That's not going to happen. So again, different than last year. You have experience at OC. You've got experience on special teams. You've got experience at the head coaching position. And that head coach is going to be more than willing to help out his defensive coordinator. Vrabel is going to have his hands all over this defense. His fingerprints will be all over that side of the football. So Terrell Williams, to me, was not as significant or maybe as important of a hire, with all due respect, than Josh McDaniels was, because you want somebody running that offense, because we know Mike Vrabel ain't running that offense. So it all makes sense, right? Like, you look at Vrabel, program builder, as we talked about. He hires Josh McDaniels as his OC, somebody who's going to run that side of the football, somebody he trusts, somebody who's done it for a long time. That's set. I'm going to take the swing on the defensive side because he's my guy. He's got plenty of experience within football. I think he's really sharp and good at what he does. And if, everything goes badly early, I'll step in and I'll help him out. So, when you look at how Vrabel's going to handle his DC, I think it's much, much different than how Mayo handled his DC and DeMarcus Covington. Impressive resume for Terrell Williams. Let's go through some of it. Mike Giardi wrote this: the Titans were stout against the run during Williams' tenure. They yielded the fewest rushing yards per game in 2022, the lowest rushing average, and the fourth fewest rushing yards in the NFL. In 2023, the Titans finished 7th in the NFL in opponent rushing average, 3.8 yards per carry. Also ranked 1st in the NFL in defensive red zone efficiency, 37.7%. Now, of course, you got to credit Shane Bowen, the guy who was calling the defense, but Terrell Williams was part of that staff. The defense also tied in 2023 for the 4th fewest rushing touchdowns allowed and yielded the 5th fewest overall touchdowns by opponents. In 2021, Titans outside linebackers, the group accounted for 19 total sacks, including 12 sacks by Harold Landry III, which led the team, set a career high, ranked 10th in the NFL. This year in Detroit, according to my guy Andrew Callahan, Detroit's run defense was 12th in EPA. They were 4th in rushing success rate allowed. So when you look at Terrell Williams, his defensive lines have been defined as being great at stopping the run. Whether it was in Tennessee or when he goes to Detroit, Terrell Williams, his defensive lines historically do a good job against the run, if not very good job against the run. And also, they're known for a little bit of pressure, right? I think you'll see a lot more, 4 down, so to speak, up front, 4 defensive linemen. I think you'll see a lot more of that than we've seen the last, couple years. And I think you'll see a bit more pressure, not schemed up blitzing pressure, but I think Terrell Williams will allow his guys to pin their ears back from time to time and hunt after the quarterback. So they're known for getting some pressure, especially from the outside edges, and they're known for stopping the run. That's what Terrell Williams has done. So pretty impressive resume for what he's been a part of over the last, 4, 5, 6 years. He has helped guys develop. Jeffrey Simmons is one of them, obviously. And when we talk about a defensive line coach becoming a coordinator, we think of 2 young guys, right? At least I do. I think of Christian Barmore, if he is capable of getting back on the field, and we all keep our fingers crossed that Barmore will be back. I think of Christian Barmore, and I think of Keon White. Jeffrey Simmons reacted on social media to Terrell Williams being hired as the DC. Pumped and jacked for his guy Terrell. And if Terrell Williams can work his magic on Barmore and Keon White, those guys, again, hopefully Barmore is physically capable of doing it, but those 2 young players should take a step forward, if not a big step forward, with Terrell Williams running that side of the football along with Mike Vrabel. I would anticipate Keon White and Christian Barmore being better. That's what I would anticipate. Again, every time with Barmore, the caveat is if he's physically capable of getting back, which we all hope. But Keon White, Christian Barmore should be ecstatic about Mike Vrabel and Terrell Williams being the combination leading this defense. Now, I know there's been some concern about a defensive line coach moving up to defensive coordinator. I know that Burt Breer has come out and said, that was part of the problem. DeMarcus Covington never worked with linebackers. He never worked with the secondary, all of those kinds of things. There are a couple of examples, though, in the NFL of defensive line coaches being defensive coordinators, and actually one of them has done a tremendous job, and one of them was part of the head coach cycle this offseason. I'm talking about Anthony Weaver. Anthony Weaver started I don't know if he started his career, but he was with Baltimore. He went from Baltimore to Miami to become Miami's defensive coordinator. Anthony Weaver's background is defensive line. So there's one example to tell you that it can work. I'm not telling you it will work, but there's one shining example of a defensive line coach making the transition to defensive coordinator who's done a really good job. Weaver is well-respected, big-time reputation, did a great job with that Miami defense this year, especially after losing Jalen Phillips. And he is somebody who I think will be a head coach over the next, couple of years. So Anthony Weaver's an example. Jacksonville, Ryan Nielsen also went from defensive line to defensive coordinator. Eric Washington in Chicago this past season, from defensive line to defensive coordinator. So there are 3 other examples in the NFL of a coach going from D-line to DC, making that jump. Covington made the jump this past year. We know it didn't go well. And it is unusual. It's rare, right? You only got 3 guys aside from Terrell Williams. So 4 out of the 32 defensive coordinators will be former defensive line coaches. So it is rare, but it's not unheard of. That's my point here. Final thing I'll say about Terrell Williams before we move on to some other coaching news, and I have a couple of more thoughts on Josh McDaniels after last night's podcast. One more thing, the tone. The tone of this staff. Last year, Elliot Wolf talked about we're going to be less hard-ass or whatever it was, right? They weren't going to be as much hardo as Belichick might have been. This staff is much more hardo than last year's staff. Much more hardo. Mike Vrabel is a hardo. He's got empathy. He's got sympathy. He does a great job of connecting with his players, understanding their concerns, but he's a hardo. Josh McDaniels is a hardo. That's why he did not work as a head coach, because the entire 53 did not pick up what Josh was putting down. But he is a hardo. Now, the good thing is I think Drake May is the right kind of quarterback to deal with this kind of coaching staff, because I think Drake May is a hardo. Hardo is not a bad term. And I think Drake May has those qualities. So Vrabel and McDaniels are different. And so is Terrell Williams. This was from Mike Giardi at BSJ. What's Williams' philosophy? Giardi writes, I found this gem from the offseason. This is what Williams said, quote, about his philosophy. Violent. That's it. I'm not going to give you a dissertation about, hey, we have to do this and that. We have to play violent, and we have to play with effort. The violent element of it is a big part of playing that position. You want guys that accept that. You have to accept that. This guy is preaching violence, baby. He went on to say about defensive line, that's just what the position is. It's a violent, high-collision position, and you have to play with effort. And if you can't do that, then you're going to have a hard time playing. I haven't seen very many high-level starters that aren't violent players. That just doesn't work. It doesn't go hand in hand. Okay, then. You've got some hardos. You've got some coaches that will certainly push for physicality. Vrabel is going to be all about physicality. Williams is going to be all about violence and physicality. And don't get it twisted, Josh McDaniels is also going to be about physicality. Josh McDaniels loves the downhill run game. So this team is going to be very physical, violent, hopefully fun. All right. Got more thoughts on the coaching staff. We've got some rumors. We've got a report about more coaches joining this offensive staff. We'll get to that in a minute. Also, I'll have some more Josh McDaniels thoughts after last night's podcast. Couple more things I want to hit about Josh before we move on. So still have a lot to come. First, let me jump to the Super Chats, though. Got a couple in here. Pete Pistorius comes in. $5 Super Chat. Thank you, Pete. Same week that Vrabel was hired over Johnson and says we want an off that's aggressive, not reckless. Johnson leads second 5-interception effort sinking Lions. So, yeah, aggressive, not reckless, right? Vrabel says we don't have to throw the football 50 yards downfield to try to create a 50-yard pass, right? Or 50-yard explosive play. You can get explosive plays in different ways. You don't always just have to chuck and duck, so to speak. And, the Jamison Williams interception from last weekend, that was aggressive. Is that something that Vrabel would okay? I think Vrabel is okay with trick plays. It's just the timing of those trick plays. And we know Josh McDaniels loves trick plays. He's run plenty of them as an OC and head coach. Loves trick plays. But it's all about the timing. So it is interesting, Vrabel's brought in. He says we want to be aggressive, not reckless. And then that same weekend, the guy who was supposedly the second choice of the Patriots, Ben Johnson, leads an offense that ends up having a quarterback throw a crap load of interceptions, and then that trick play that backfired. Rob D jumps in, $5 super chat. Thank you, Rob. This offseason was about raising the floor. I'd confidently say the floor has been raised several floors already. I hope Patriots fans are pleased. I am. I was just talking to my dad a little while ago before jumping on this podcast. I just said to him, I love what's going on. I love what is happening so far. I love the idea of Mike Vrabel as the head coach for all the reasons I mentioned when that happened. I love the idea of McDaniels being the OC for all the reasons that I mentioned last night on the podcast when that news broke. I love retaining Jeremy Springer because he did an unbelievable job with special teams last year. Analytically, one of the best special teams units in all of football after being one of the worst. Again, Terrell Williams, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this is a great hire. I don't know if he's going to work out. But you have a lot more wiggle room with Terrell Williams because of Vrabel's presence. So I think people should be very excited, including the fact that Vrabel got his man, his right-hand man, right? He brings in his right-hand man, Ryan Cowden, and Vrabel and Cowden are going to run this personnel department. So I think a lot of good things are happening here. All right, don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe, help a brother out. That's how we drive the algorithm, trying to hit 6,000 subscribers. Let's get to more coaching news. New York Jets running backs coach Tony Dews is headed to New England. Now, I've seen some back and forth here. Nothing has been reported as far as the job he's going to take with the Patriots. Yes, he has been a running backs coach. He was the running backs coach of the Jets this past season, but it has not been confirmed if he's going to be the running backs coach here with the Patriots. He has worked with tight ends in the past. I believe he played tight end in college. So he's worked with tight ends. He's worked with running backs, and he's also worked with wide receivers. So I'm not ready to sit here and tell you that Tony Dews is going to be the running backs coach. That has not been, officially made official. So we'll see what his official title is, but he does join the Patriots offensive staff. Tony Dews was with Vrabel in Tennessee. He was a running backs coach for a while. I also think he had some tight ends coaching there in Tennessee under Vrabel as well. My concern, I'm going to put this out there early. My biggest concern right now is if this is going to end up a Vrabel offensive staff under Josh McDaniels. I do not want that. I'm fine with a couple of guys. A good coach is a good coach. I'm fine if McDaniels is fine. What I don't want is the Bill O'Brien treatment from Bill Belichick. O'Brien was not allowed to bring in his staff. He was allowed to bring in one of his guys, and that was it. The rest of that offensive staff was a Bill Belichick production. I do not want that. I do not want this offensive staff to be a Mike Vrabel production. I want Josh McDaniels to get his staff. If there's one or two guys from Vrabel, fine. But I want McDaniels to have his staff. If he's going to be the head coach of the offense, he's going to run that side of the ball. He should have significant say on who's coaching underneath him on that side of the ball. And I do have some concerns that Vrabel's just going to bring the band back together offensively and bring a lot of these guys back. I want Josh to have say. Now again, maybe Josh will have say. Maybe Josh will, be okay with, all right, hire that guy, fine. I could work with that guy, fine. Maybe Josh knows some of these guys. He's crossed networks with them. But I just don't want this to be Mike Vrabel walking in and telling McDaniels, that's your running backs coach, that's your tight ends coach, that's your offensive lines coach, that's your wide receivers. I don't want that. I don't want that. I want McDaniels to have some level and a rather high level of autonomy within that offensive staff. And we'll see. We'll see who else comes in. We'll see if it's a bunch of guys from the Tennessee days or if you have a hire or two from the Rams, for example, or you have a hire or two with guys that have worked with McDaniels in the past. I don't want this to be, I don't want this to be Mike Vrabel's offense. Josh McDaniels runs this offense, and I want him to have say with his staff. All right, before we get to other news, Thomas Brown news, Terry jumps in with a hump day super chat, a $50 super chat. Terry, thank you for your support and your contribution, your generosity. It is very much appreciated. You've helped this program so much. Liking all this breaking news this week. We'll have a lot more news, I'm sure, this week. It's not going to be as sexy as OC and DC, but we are going to have these staffs kind of being, filled up, right? I mean, you've got your DC, you've got your OC. We're going to start hearing a lot of news about who else is coming in to join the party. Terry, thank you so much for the $50 super chat. I hope that the continued rehab on the knee continues to go well. Appreciate you so much. Thank you, Terry. All right, more news before we wrap up with some Josh McDaniels thoughts, because I have a couple of leftover thoughts that I think you'll want to hear about Josh McDaniels. Jonathan Jones from CBS last night reported that Thomas Brown could be hired by the Patriots. Of course, Brown was interviewed last week for the OC job, and I had Brown on my list of OC candidates last year. I would love if Thomas Brown was added to this staff. He has coached under Sean McVay for a number of years. He did pretty well in Chicago last year when he was thrown in as the OC. And after Shane Waldron was fired, he was thrown in OC for a few weeks, and he actually got Caleb Williams to play better. He's smart. He's young. I would be all for Thomas Brown being a part of this coaching staff. I'd be all for it. Let's see if it happens. All right, let's get to Josh McDaniels. Before we get to some narratives and some more things being said about McDaniels, let me just put a bow on the 2021 season. I talked about the 2021 season last night. Mac Jones, bunch of new players because of free agency, and I gave you some numbers as far as what that offensive production looked like in 2021. I forgot to tell you that the offense was 10th in DVOA. So they had a top 10 defense offense in DVOA in 2021 with Mac Jones as a rookie and a bunch of new faces at the skill positions. So 10th in DVOA. Greg Bedard also posted this today about that 2021 offense. They were third in plays for negative or 0 yards. So they were always getting yards, always churning out something. They were fourth in 3-and-out percentage, extended drives. They were fourth in rushing EPA with Mac Jones. Tells you all you need to know about the running backs in the run game scheme from Josh. They were eighth. They were eighth in the NFL in 2021 in plays of 20-plus yards, chunk plays. They were 10th in plays of 10-plus yards. They were 10th on third down. So they were a top 10 offense on third down. They were 11th in the red zone. So they were just outside the top 10 in red zone. I mean, that's impressive given the circumstances. 10th in DVOA, 4th in 3-and-out percentage, 4th in rush EPA, 10th on third down, 11th in the red zone. They had the 8th most 20-plus yard plays in the league that year. Again, with Mac Jones, a guy who doesn't fire the football downfield 45 yards. So impressive given the circumstances. Let's get to a couple of other things I've heard in the past 18 hours or so. And let's start with whether or not this was a Robert Kraft hire. Is Josh McDaniels here because the Krafts wanted him to be here? It's a fair question. It's a fair question to ask because of the history. McDaniels has been here multiple times, as we know. McDaniels was reportedly on his way to Indianapolis and then, decided to meet with Robert Kraft one last time to give him a shot, and Robert kept him here. As I've said before, Josh McDaniels was really the first Gerard Mayo. Robert Kraft wanted McDaniels to take over for Belichick when Belichick moved on. McDaniels got a shot to be a head coach with the Raiders before that happened. But Robert Kraft loves himself some Josh McDaniels, and I'm sure Jonathan Kraft loves Josh McDaniels as well. So it is a fair question to ask whether or not McDaniels was a Kraft hire or a Vrabel hire. Phil Perry was on Zolak and Bertrand today, and said that a lot of the talk within the OC circles was that Josh was getting the job even before Mike Vrabel got his job. Here's what I'll say. I appreciate Phil Perry, and I'm sure he's heard that from offensive coordinators, and I'm sure he's heard that from some people in the game, no doubt 100%. But a couple things. A, that could be defeatist talk by others. That could be excuse-making by others, right? Oh, I'm not going to go to New England because they're just going to hire Josh McDaniels. It could be. It could be defeatist talk. But here's the most important thing. And here's why I think Mike Vrabel was just fine hiring Josh McDaniels as his OC. And this is why I don't put that hire on the Crafts. Because back on December 17th of 2024, Albert Breer, our guy Bert, was on ESPN 1000 in Chicago. And back on December 17th, Bert Breer told ESPN 1000 that Vrabel was at the top of the Chicago Bears list with his relationship with Ryan Poles. And at the time, on December 17th, Bert Breer said on ESPN 1000 that Mike Vrabel's choice for offense would be Tommy Rees or Josh McDaniels. That's December 17th, folks. December 17th, Bert was mentioning Josh McDaniels as a favorite to go with Mike Vrabel if Vrabel got a head coaching job. It was either Tommy Rees or it was McDaniels. Those were the guys at the top of his list. Again, that was December 17th. That wasn't January 17th. That was December 17th. Now, of course, Tommy Rees stayed in Cleveland out of loyalty to Kevin Stefanski. He got promoted as the OC. But Bert's talking about Josh McDaniels being married with Mike Vrabel right after the Arizona Cardinals game. So this isn't like it was plucked out of thin air. This isn't like it was a surprise. Mike Vrabel has been linked with Josh McDaniels well before Gerard Mayo was fired. Well before people thought Gerard Mayo would be fired. Mike Vrabel was linked with Josh McDaniels to go to Chicago first and foremost, if it wasn't going to be Tommy Rees. So that's why I don't buy into this thing that it was just, all the Robert Kraft, Jonathan Kraft production. Because this was mentioned well before the head coach opening actually happened. It was established that Josh McDaniels could be part of a Mike Vrabel package. It was established before Mayo was fired, weeks before Mayo was fired. So I don't think it's, there's something weird here. I don't. Now, of course, the relationship with the Crafts helps Josh get the job. There's no denying that. Again, the history is the history, and it's a fair question to ask. It's just I go back to the middle of December and say, Vrabel was being linked with Josh McDaniels back in the middle of December. Google it, as they say. I got some more intel. Last night I mentioned that Josh McDaniels moved around this past year to learn from different teams and different coaching staffs. I've got some more information on that for you. So let's go back to Bert. Bert Breer wrote this, the MMQB. Recently, he wrote, I do think McDaniels would be the right pick to be Vrabel's OC in New England, and not just because of what he's accomplished, but how he used his year off. Here's what Bert wrote. McDaniels spent time with NFL and college programs to evolve his offense. In particular, I think McDaniels' study of the college game will make what has been a pretty complex offense more user-friendly with the adaptations he's got coming. So I mentioned this last night, but I wanted to add a little bit more to it. That was from Bert Breer. Evan Lazar wrote this recently. McDaniels took the year off to visit college programs such as Ohio State and USC to pick their brains about offense. That suggests that McDaniels wants to update his offense when he gets back into coaching. So both Bert Breer and Evan Lazar give us a little bit more detail about what McDaniels was doing over this past year, over this past football season, when he wasn't actually coaching. He was going around, as Greg Bedard wrote, trying to find new tricks. And, some of these teams use lots of motion. McDaniels hasn't always used lots of motion within his offense, right? So maybe he's learning about the motion. And he wants to, use motion a lot more than he has in the past. But McDaniels did go around and he did study NFL teams and he studied college programs. That tells me he gets it. That tells me that McDaniels wants to evolve his offense. Now, I got to see it. As I said last night, it's a concern and it's a question if McDaniels is going to evolve his offense. I'm optimistic he will for the reasons I brought up last night, but it's a fair question to ask. I just love the fact that he went around the country and learned new things and said, this is how I've got to change this offense up. That's good. It's a very good thing. Shape it around Drake May. Emphasize Drake May's strengths. Accentuate the strengths, hide the weaknesses. Now, as far as the complexity of a Josh McDaniels offense, I think that's a result of who the quarterback is. And I've heard others say this. With Brady was in the same offense for, 20 years. He had a supercomputer for a brain. So they just kept building and building and building off the original offense that was installed. That wasn't the case in other situations with Josh, right? Like Cam Newton did not run Tom Brady's offense. Cam Newton did not run what the Patriots used to run. They put a lot less on Cam's plate because he was capable of less. When they had Mac Jones as a rookie, they didn't throw everything at Mac Jones right away. When McDaniels was on the Julian Edelman podcast, what is it? Names and Games, Games and Names. When he was on that podcast, McDaniels talked about, you guys should check out the clip if you haven't seen it, but McDaniels talked about how you develop a young quarterback and you put as much as you can in the bucket. And then when the bucket is full, you stop. And you've got to wait for that person. You've got to wait for that quarterback to catch up to everything, have a full understanding, and then you put a little bit more in the bucket, in the cup, so to speak, right? That's what McDaniels said to Edelman when he was asked about developing quarterbacks. I don't think McDaniels is going to walk into the office and say, Drake, you're running the Tom Brady offense. Like, here's a giant book of plays. Good luck to you. I think he's going to handle Drake May in a similar fashion as he handled Mac Jones. And he'll start there. And then when May proves that he understands what the hell is going on and can make certain checks and audibles and calls at the line of scrimmage, then he will move on to the next. He'll put a little bit more into the bucket or the cup. I don't think McDaniels is going to walk in and overwhelm Drake May. I just don't think he's going to do that. He didn't do that to Mac. He didn't do it to Cam. He didn't do it to Matt Castle when Castle had to take over. He didn't do that with Jimmy Garoppolo. He didn't do it with Jacoby Brissett that one night when they played against Houston. Remember that they found out that Brissett was going to be starting that game like a day before the game, if not, a shorter amount of time than that. I don't think McDaniels is going to just dump everything on May. I think he will slowly integrate the offense. He will help him. A lot of people will tell you that, McDaniels somewhat held the hand of Mac Jones throughout a lot of his rookie season. Play after play after play, right? Making sure that Mac knew what was in front of him. Making sure before that communication is cut off in the helmet, what they wanted to run. So I think McDaniels will have patience with Drake May. I don't think he's going to be throwing it all onto his lap. It's not what I expect. And as far as the versatility, McDaniels has been versatile within his offense. We can't forget that. Andrew Callahan wrote about it this morning, and he put it perfectly. McDaniels transformed the Patriots offense from a spread offense to a two tight end offense to a power run offense to win their last Super Bowl. So he has shown that he can be malleable. That's not how you say it. Malleable. There you go. That's better. He has shown that he could be fluid within his offense. That's a little bit better. So I don't think, the complexity is a fair question, but I don't think Josh is going to make it too complex for the young quarterback and whoever else comes in. I don't think he's going to make it too complex for Jalen Polk or Javon Baker if Baker's still here. Super chat, $10 super chat from Anonymous. Thanks, Nick. Great pods this week. Thank you, Anonymous. I appreciate you. Thank you for the contribution, my friend. Don't forget that you can give us that thumbs up. Don't forget that thumbs up helps us with the algorithm here on YouTube. Always appreciate those likes. Don't forget to throw a comment in. How do you feel about the Patriots coaching staff so far? Vrabel head coach, McDaniels OC, Terrell Williams, DC, Jeremy Springer, special teams coordinator. How you feeling about that? Like it? Love it? Hate it? Indifferent? Throw a comment in. The likes and the comments help us. And we're trying to hit 6,000 subscribers, folks. I want to do that by free agency, so we got about 5-6 weeks left. But we need to push this thing. So don't forget to subscribe and click that notify bell as well. I do an NFL podcast on Thursday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern, live, at least through the Super Bowl. Doing that again tomorrow night. It's called Crafts and Kickoffs. Pretty simple concept. I drink a beer, and we talk about the NFL. I'll be hosting that tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, right here on this YouTube channel. I'll be back on Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. If something big breaks, I think we're past most of the big stuff. But if something big breaks, of course, I'll be here for a breaking news podcast before then. But I'll talk to you tomorrow night, Crafts and Kickoffs at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'll talk to you Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, live on YouTube. Thank you for all the support. Appreciate every single one of you. This has been The Nick Cattle Show.